Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Jeff Richardson, host with the most. You know how it goes. Definitely not a ghost. We'll fix it in post. Hey, I'm a rhyming guy. I'm also a writer. And when I'm not writing poesy or songs, I'm doing prose. So here's some prose. Day 1, chapter 19, Phalaene. She was drifting. Her suit's attitudinal jets were nearly out of fuel. She felt as if she was more or less upright, a slow motion Cassiopeia floating directionless across a planetless sky. Let me try that again. She felt as if she was more or less upright, a slow motion Cassiopeia floating directionless across a planetless sky. She had an itch somewhere down below. She felt beads of sweat on her back and a tickle in her throat. The soles of her feet were a bit sore. She wondered if she'd be drifting long or if her rescue was really coming at all. She trusted Grundle to stand by his word and do his best to keep her alive. The problem was, could he do it? Could he get someone to fly all the way out here just to grab her? More than once, she'd thought about his massive body. He had to be the largest human she'd ever laid He had to be the largest human she'd ever laid eyes upon. Good gods, he was a beast. His strength was undeniable when he was upon her, below her, all around her, feeding her desire. Good gods, how she wished she had pursued him before those last blessed hours. Of course, that might have jeopardized her mission even further. She had nearly chosen to stay aboard just to spend a little more time in his tender grasp. She almost wished she hadn't fed Portillion that cookie. But she had her orders, and she couldn't disobey them. She owed the snakes too much to waste the opportunity. She'd been vaguely tempted to feed on Portillion, the poor boy, but the job was more important than any rank personal interest. She didn't dare risk raising Portillion's heart rate, given that the device's lethality would be accelerated by the increased blood flow. Now that she'd escaped the ship, she imagined the device would finish her task soon. If she were lucky, the rescue would come quickly, before Grundle had the presence of mind to call it off. But she knew he wouldn't do that. He was a no reason to add another death to this one sort of guy. She had a brief twinge of regret for taking Portillion away from his mother, but she didn't dwell on it. She had other things to think about. Like how much fucking money she was about to make. Assuming she survived, she was gonna be made. Okay, so a couple things on this one. Number one, Phalaene's a badass. Slow motion Cassiopeia. Obviously, this is a different galaxy. They wouldn't have Cassiopeia, so that's an anachronism. In that last episode, we were talking about raccoons and sparrows and shit. Basically, there's so much different stuff in this book already that I just decided to use some stuff from our regular lives so you could have a way in. Because each one of these things I can make a fantasy version and it's going to sound stupid. I don't know. I might go back if people really want me to. I might go back in and put more random lore in there. But anyway, this death cookie I created, I'm really excited about. And apparently Phalaene cares about money and not just rescuing her kid. So that's interesting. Next one. Let me beef up the texture. Hit this weed. The hell? Oh no. Stem broke. That's no bueno. I thought it was a little tight. Don't force it, I guess, is always good advice. Shit. Chapter 20. Walk with me, child. Aeana bristled at Mother Barillon's unearned familiarity, but there was little she could say. Mothers of mercy were on an equal footing. Once elevated, they dispensed with honorifics. Often they reverted to the sort of relationships they might enjoy outside the order. In this case, Barillon had chosen to treat Aeana as she had been before her confirmation, as a well-regarded pupil. Although, as back in her training days, Mother Barillon was far too familiar for Aeana's taste. Spare me the false kindness, sister. I am not your charge any more. Barillon drove a hard stare through her devilish smile. You needn't be so fiery, my darling. We are equals now. Let's try to be civil, if we can. Her smile was like a halberd cleaving its way through a line of peasant militia. Thankfully, Aeana felt the pride of knowing she was held firmly in the holy light of Zora. Peace and blessings be upon her. The pair reached the lagoon at the edge of the temple's well-tended wilderness and sat on a stone bench. Barillon produced a hunk of stale bread and began tossing bits of it to a flock of ducks. Aeana sat in silence, studying the older woman's aura. There was mischief here, of that she was certain. Barillon resumed. In the early days of the church, men and women were equal partners in service to the goddess. They mated and bore children. They traveled as partners. They coupled and parted as freely as these simple waterfowl. With the ascension of Aeana the Prideful, however, all of that changed. Aeana took note of Barillon's use of one of the original Aeana's lesser-known titles. A crafty old bitch she was. Barillon continued. Now the church had a martial function. To preserve the power and purity of the church, such intimate relationships were eschewed. To combat evil indirectly, secrecy was valued. A series of steps were taken to purge the church of its softer elements, and a system of layers was created. These layers made it harder and harder for men to rise through the ranks, and soon women held nearly all leadership roles in the church. Over the years, these men of faith drifted away, entering other professions, or joining the many other religions propping up at the time. Now we see men enjoying many powerful positions in society, just as we daughters of mercy are losing our influence. As you well know, there are those who've suggested we bring back the ideas of family and inclusion. She patted Aeonna's knee, sending a chill shuddering through her body. Barillon stood and cast what was left of the loaf of bread into the water. She turned quickly, her braid tumbling from her habit, its rich auburn color shining in the early morning sun. I refuse to bow before the cult of domesticity. Let the other religions bend to the will of popular opinion. I believe that Zora is served best by women. Women who know what it means to fight, to shed blood in the service of the goddess. Women who pledge their life and the lives of their sisters to who pledge their life and the lives of their sisters to the service of humanity. Aeona Stargazer, I applaud your ascension to the post of champion, and I hereby pledge to lay down my life to serve at your feet. She drew her ceremonial dagger, its jewels glimmering like rainbow ripples in the lagoon. She bent her knee, her pure white robes soiling in the mud. Blessed Mother Aeona, I bow to you, that you may defeat any and all who stand in our way. For the goddess. Aeona was stunned. What sort of gambit was this? Did Barillon honestly expect her to take her at her word? Barillon remained kneeling, head bowed, dagger in the dirt. Aeona touched her garment. The woman raised her head. They stared into each other's eyes for what seemed an eternity. Rise. Your gesture is most appreciated. As Barillon rose, Aeona felt a stirring in her intestines. Was this what power felt like? She felt sick. By the goddess, I have not the stomach for this. Barillon dipped her head once again, returned the dagger to her waist, and walked back to the temple. Aeona sat and pondered. In time, she imagined, insight would come. In time, she imagined, insight would come. Would come. Ah, fuck. Oh, man. It turns out. Shit. Turns out I had a whole different book that I've just replaced. So now I'm just going to have to keep adding to it. Unless I should start a new book based on when the heroes arrive on Calustria. I could be like the city of blank, and then this one is the city of secrets. I don't know. I called it City of Stars, but that seems kind of weak. I don't know. Because it was just the Frontier Star in book 3, but whatever. Chapter 4, or book 4, chapter 21. Erasing that. Sorry, I'm just erasing this thing here. Barillon, you thought she was an enemy, but here she is pledging fealty. That's wild, huh? Chapter 21. Grundle. Grundle, hurry up. We're almost there. Jorn tapped the door frame and darted off towards the bridge. Grundle eased up off the cot, rubbing his legs. They still ached whenever he woke. The injuries he'd sustained over the previous few weeks had yet to completely heal. He looked out his window and studied the horizon. The blue-green planet loomed massively, its near vicinity littered with ships, satellites, orbital platforms, and a veritable sea of random space junk. As the window was actually a vid screen, he could bring up the names and descriptions of each pinprick of light. There, the famed mega star cruiser Ascension. There, the notorious Ravel microfleet. Over there, the huge swirling mass of debris left by the implosion of the Evinrude, way back in PC 127. His mind reeled with all the stories he'd learned regarding Calustria and its many catastrophes and space battles. From classic films to history texts to audio documentaries, he was awash in facts about the second Lunari homeworld. Truthfully, he was more than a little obsessed with the place. Perhaps because so many historical events included it, but also because he'd tried in the last few weeks to learn everything he could about the planet that gave life to Aeana Stargazer. One might say he'd become her biggest fan. He smiled at the thought of seeing her again. She would surely be quite busy, what with her new promotion, but with luck, he'd be able to get an audience. Protector of the faith. He couldn't even imagine it. At 22 years old, Aeana Stargazer had become the second most powerful woman in the Daughters of Mercy hierarchy. He was floored. Was the universe so devoid of heroes that a woman as young as she could rise so quickly? Not that she didn't deserve it. She was a woman of infinite potential, and her faith was as strong as anyone he'd ever met. Not to mention a heart as big as the galaxy. Grundle was in love, sure, but he was also in awe.
All hands on deck for customs check. Step on it, gentlemen.
Captain Sandemon sounded like the stentorian actor he'd portrayed in film. Grundle rolled his eyes and headed to the bridge. As he walked, he hummed along with the song playing over the speaker system, The Fields of Marion Green. Every surface of the ship was gleaming and pulsing with life. Captain Thraxus and Joss Ramsdell had built a beautiful vessel. The captain's spirit was evident in every curve and length of steel. The man had been a gift, and they had let him die. No, he let us live, that we might serve a higher purpose. We must recover the statue and deliver it to those who will keep it safe. Grundle groaned as he climbed the steps to the bridge. Sandemon was regaling the crew a tale of daring do that began in the spaceport of Calustria City.
At this very spot, the old man gestured, at this very pinpoint in history, we made our stand.
And keep it out of the hands of those who would misuse it. That last part, he's talking about the statue. It's easier to tell in text because they're both in italics, but might be a little confusing. for y'all. Well, that's 20 minutes. Thanks for listening. You know what to do. Listen to Everything is Awesome. Share your work at EIA Podcast on Twitter. Everything is Awesome Podcast at gmail.com is the email. Get hip, get with it. And we'll talk to you later. Peace.